Well, welcome everyone to another special bonus episode of the Your Morning Coffee podcast. We are honored to sit down again with our friend Jaime Markinet, VP of Music Insights and Industry Relations over at Illuminate.
Illuminate just released their mid-year report, Trends in Music, TV, and Film. Jaime breaks it all down for us. We discuss the health of the music business, a spike in CD sales, growth areas, music documentaries, and of course, AI.
So now, without further ado, here's our conversation with Jaime Markinet from Illuminate. Let it roll.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air. On the air. On the air. On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Jaime Markinet, good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Good to see you as well, Jay, Mike. Really a pleasure. Always enjoy being here. Been doing great. And it's so nice to see you as well. I hope you both have been great as well.
Thank you. We're pretty excited. We always love having you on the show. You know, we've got the Illuminate mid-year report out. Holy cow. This thing, it just seems like it gets bigger and better every time you do it. But this one's like 75 pages and you combine music and film and TV and holy cow. And before we jump into the report, number one, kudos on a beautiful report. I don't know who designs these things for you, but when you can take that sort of complex data and trends and sort of make it into something visually that you can glance at and you don't have to be a data scientist to actually get it. So number one, kudos, but tell us about how you put this thing together.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Jay. And yeah, shout out to our analysts as well as our design team for really taking the data and presenting it in a way that makes sense. I've always agree with you totally that if I can't figure out a chart in about 8 seconds, then, I typically will move on. So, I think that they've done a wonderful job in making sure that the point gets across very, very clearly there. Hey, it's a full team effort, and this year, as you mentioned, we've also included trends from film and TV. We're probably mostly known for our music analysis, but we have a long-standing vertical in film and TV. We service film and TV clients as well. And I think that overall, when you look at the media landscape, it's all entertainment, right? So music is entertainment, film and TV is entertainment, and we've kind of bridged that in many music reports in the past where we've done our music documentaries and what the impact of SVOD music documentaries is on consumption. And then obviously we've looked at gaming and those sorts of things as well. But when you kind of step back and look at this as all entertainment and it's all mind share and, in a way it's all competing against each other, right? For mind share and attention. It just made sense to work on a report that started to give a more holistic view of the entertainment landscape.
Lovely. Well, Jaime, just if you're in an elevator with somebody and they say, how is the health of the music business so far this year? What is your take on that, just broadly?
I think from a volume and a consumption standpoint, it's actually doing pretty well. We actually saw a slight acceleration. And when I mean acceleration, I'm referring to the percent year-over-year change. And at the end of the year end for 2025, Most of our figures were, I think it was 4.6% U.S. on-demand audio growth this year. Right now, standing, it is at 4.8%. So we did see a little bit of a slight acceleration, more streams, more volume, higher percentage change through the first half of this year. I think that there's the second half of last year was a little slower than I think I and a lot of other people expected in terms of the overall volume. We saw a little bit of a more sharp drop through the fall. And it was nice to then see a little bit of a bounce back and a little acceleration. So I would say overall, little acceleration, holding steady, doing pretty well. But then obviously there's a lot of new technologies and a lot of new ways to engage with music that we just continue to see. And I think that for the overall fan experience, that's always a good thing too, for more ways to engage.
Anything surprise you when you started shuffling through this data?
Two things surprised me. One is the resurgence of CDs. And I feel like we're going to talk about that a little bit. That did surprise me, and it surprised me to the level of which they gained. And not to give away the whole thing, but we did see CDs up about 16-17%. It's not all K-pop. I know a lot of people want to say, well, it's all K-pop.
I was going to ask you.
All K-pop. And I think there's some other factors there. And then the other thing that did surprise me is when we crunched our final numbers, we saw dance electronic jump up to the number one growth genre. And again, when we talk about growth genres, we're talking about share point change, right? How much did a particular genre grow its share of streaming since the last period? And dance electronic is having a little bit of a moment and jumped to number one. That moment is driven by new acts like John Summit and Disco Lines, but then also a resurgence of tracks from 2015 to 2017. I believe there was a nostalgia trend at the beginning of this year, the 2016 10-year kind of reunion nostalgia trend that was at the beginning of this year that helped drive things like the Chainsmokers and others as well. So it had a little bit of a two-pronged growth driving strategy there. And that being the number one growth genre did jump out to me as a little bit of a surprise.
We were talking about before we got on with you with CDs. There's a lot of companies now putting out CD players, and it's crazy that Jay and I mentioned that when we started our career, we were just shoving vinyl out the door. Nobody wanted vinyl; it's bringing in CDs, and then of course we were around when streaming took over, and this boomerang effect is really pretty stunning. So in the report, CD sales grew 16% versus vinyl's 2.4%. Is vinyl's growth actually slowing sort of structurally, meaning, production capacity, and they're expensive, perhaps price fatigue? And then on the CD side, is that you mentioned it's not necessarily only BTS sort of CD-driven excitement, so to speak, but who's buying CDs and what's going on with vinyl? It's the slowdown, if there's a slowdown.
Well, vinyl's still up. And so I want to make that, I'm going to make it clear. It's still up. The volume is still higher. It is still up. I think it's 2.4%.
Right.
So it is still up. But it did not grow quite as fast through the first half of this year. CD sales, interesting. Okay, so let's talk about CDs. CDs up 16.3%, like you mentioned. Let's take BTS out of it. Let's take K-pop out of it. CDs are still up 6.7%, right?
Wow.
So this is not just K-pop.
Yeah.
I do think that we've seen CDs really start to contribute to the fandom, popularized by K-pop, but not solely exclusive to K-pop anymore. You see a lot more variance throughout other genres, starting to move the CD into more of that collectible, more of that fandom element. And then, there is the price point, right? CDs, $12 to $14 a pop, which is a considerably less expensive item than the vinyl record. So I think in today's society where, it's just crazy how much I've gone and paid at the grocery store recently. I don't know the percentage on it. I should, because that's I should do the percentage for that. But it's a lot more than I paid last year at this time, that's for sure. And I do think that plays into it as well. But I think that overall we are seeing sort of the fandom element, the collectible element, and lower price point for CDs really starting to take hold. I want to reiterate that vinyl did not go down. It is still growing. But it does carry a higher price point as well. I think that the fans that are buying CDs are sort of looking for that collectible. We have found, and I know that we published a stat a few years ago, about 50% of people who bought vinyl did not have a record player. We are seeing essentially the same thing, which does point to the collectible and the fandom element of CDs, where about 50% of those who have told us in our surveys and our consumer research, and the people that we go out and survey on this, they've told us they've bought a CD player, those people who have told us they've bought a CD, when we ask them, do you have a CD player, about 50%, only 50% say yes. So it is following that trajectory there.
Interesting. Let's talk about R&B and hip hop, especially the chart share. It fell from 41% to 30% in 3 years. Why do you think that is? And does YouTube's removal from Billboard chart have anything to do with that?
Great questions all around. I was just looking at R&B hip hop. I think it's important to remember how far ahead R&B hip hop was in like the late 2000 teens, right? It's almost as if in the R&B hip hop genre, there was a jump from, CDs straight to streaming. It almost just skipped. It didn't completely skip, but it felt like it accelerated through downloads, right? It just kind of accelerated through that and went straight to streaming. And so R&B hip hop was way out ahead for a really, really long time. And I think that now we're starting to see a lot of, at least on the streaming side, we're starting to see a lot of genres that maybe had laggards to streaming. I'm thinking about country in 2020 or Christian gospel more recently, that have now started to adopt streaming, adopt those behaviors. It's a younger fan. And I think all of these things kind of combined start to provide more competition for R&B hip hop. And we're always talking about SharePoint change. And so it has to pull from somewhere too, right? So it does pull from R&B hip hop. That being said, R&B hip hop continues to be, the market leader. But we have seen that competition really eat into it. And then, there is the idea that, though R&B hip hop has lost that chart share, and you're referring to an analysis that we did of the Billboard chart, the 200, where we look at each week over the last several half years and analyze the consumption units per genre. And that's where we've seen, country and Latin and others really start to challenge that more recently. I also think it's important to note just the far-reaching impact that R&B hip hop has had on other genres in the U.S., other genres in other territories. It's had a very huge impact, and so it might be that it's also it's helped inspire a lot of other genres and musicians as well. Yeah,
interesting. Well, let's talk rock, shall we? Rock's deep catalog share hit 75% of its streaming activity. We're talking tracks 60 or more months old. That's up 5 points year over year. Is rock effectively becoming a legacy genre in streaming terms? And what does that mean for how labels should be investing in, say, new rock signings versus catalog exploitation?
What's so interesting, Mike, is that, for the last several reports, we kept noting that that rock was actually growing its share, right? It was growing its share as one of our top growth genres. So it was becoming more popular over the last year and a half, right? So I think that overall rock is really, really very popular. You're definitely seeing a lot of new acts. You're seeing Turnstile do some wonderful things in terms of, driving activity and fandom. Also just a, really great band. But you're starting to see a lot of rock bands that are younger that are starting to take off as well. But the point about jumping in share, we are seeing a lot of the rock artists and music from probably the late 90s, early 2000s really start to take off. I know that, artists like the Deftones or Slipknot or these hard rock bands from the 2000s have been driving a lot more activity over the last couple of years. So I think that there is a music discovery element and people are looking at those sorts of bands. I think Slipknot, I think doubled their streams from 2020 to 2023, if I'm not mistaken, but, or the years might be off by about one, but, there's a lot of interest and activity here. So that, rock is growing more popular, but we are seeing newer rock bands break through as well. Right. So, it's as a genre, I think it's growing well. I think that there's a lot of exciting things that are happening for rock. But it does seem like the people are kind of going back to that early 2000s, Deftones, Green Days, those sorts of rock. Goo Goo Dolls. Iris was a massive hit last year. And starting to go back to that as well. So I think overall rock's in a pretty good position. And now people are maybe discovering more from its legacy. Is it a heritage genre? I don't know if I would go as far as to say that. I wouldn't put it in the same category as some of the others that we would call maybe heritage genres, the traditional genres. But, it is people are going back to deeper catalog of rock music for sure.
I love that you say deeper catalog because, the industry says it's catalog if it's 18 months or older. And I feel like that's really misleading because a lot of what's being streamed is in maybe the last 5 years. Talk a little bit about your views on, is it a catalog world? I mean, is it really mostly that people listen to comfort food, what they went to high school and college with? Talk about new release music and discovery as opposed to catalog today.
So we are seeing that it's not covered in this report, but we'll talk about it a little bit. We did cover it a bit last year. We have seen the current volume has gone down a bit, right? So in terms of overall volume, it has gone down. Industry keeps growing, but its volume has gone down, which means, catalog has continued to grow. And so that has been a big topic and that has been a big thing. I think that typically what we see is why, we look at deep catalog starting at the 60-month point is that, from year to year, most times you see about 45 to 50% of all streaming being the most recent 5 years. And so that's pretty steady. And so that's kind of why we made that delineation there. We have seen that current has gone down this year. And it does point to more emphasis on catalog. Our Luminate Intelligence team did a report a couple months back called Retro Revival. We have a couple of stats from that report in our mid-year here. And it really speaks to sort of the data and the science and the cyclical nature of nostalgia as well as people do. We are seeing more and more people say that they're listening to older genre or older decades of music. Specifically, we see a lot of 2000s and 1990s always raise their hand. But, we are seeing a lot more interest in those. And, are things on a 25-year cycle, 30-year cycle? It sounds like it and looks like it. But we are seeing the current is down again this year. Again, not in the report. We focused on some other trends that we thought were needed some light shed on them too. But we have seen that has continued the trend that we noted last year.
Let's talk a little bit about AI, Jamie, shall we? The AI-assisted versus AI-generated distinction in this report is certainly more careful than most trade coverage. How is Luminate actually classifying tracks, and could that taxonomy become an industry standard for disclosure or licensing, perhaps?
I think on the AI front, we typically, we take everything that we put down in writing very, very seriously. And so we wanted to be very careful with this because you also notice that in the report, we talk about musicians using AI as a tool. Yeah. And I think that is sort of the distinction there. There was a particular track that was an AI remix, and we noted it as the number one AI assisted track for this year. But I think wholly AI generated is wholly AI. Hey, I'm just going to put the prompt in. I want a song that sounds, like 80s hair metal and talks about, being at the airport. And so that is just like a simple prompt. You get a song back. That's AI generated. I think that what we've tried to do here is kind of zero in a little bit on the things that are assisted, tools that are being helped to create these as well. There is the remix, which was Chill 77 and Unjaps. Their remix actually, garnered 210.7 million audio streams through just through about mid-June, to rank 282 globally. So that is an AI assisted song because it's the remix. So what we've tried to do on our side is really show how there's a bifurcation in terms of how AI can be used here. And then, in the report as well, like this is not the first time we've seen AI assisted music as well. We called out in the report, I think, that the big story, I think probably one of the bigger AI assisted stories, certainly one of the first ones was the Beatles and Now and Then, when they separated John Lennon's vocal from the original demo. That's AI assisted. They were and they were very clear about that at the time too. Like that was not a secret to anybody. Like that's what they did, and they let everybody know when they were putting that track out. So we're seeing it continue to be used as a tool, and I think that that's where we wanted to draw that line. Is like, hey, are we using this as a tool? Are we using it generated? And so I think that in the future, Luminate's position in terms of bringing more transparency and more understanding around the impact of AI tracks is just going to continue to grow. And that's something that we've certainly got our eye on, is how we can help, the industry and our clients understand what the impact is at a more granular level.
Yeah, I think you bring up a very important point, and that is that it's not as simple as just creating a song with a text prompt. There's this, there's noise reduction and stem separation and adding parts, or, training on someone's vocals, like we talk about Randy Travis or the Brenda Lee example. And some of those, I feel like there are going to be more and more of these tools. And I think it's going to be challenging when almost all music created has some type of AI used in it in some level, which brings me to my question, which is, Luminate has all of this consumption data for the tracks that are being used in AI training. Does Luminate see any signal yet of, catalogs opting out of AI, maybe performing differently commercially, or, streaming behavior?
Not currently. And to be perfectly honest, Jay, not everybody is telling us that they have been opting out. So it is kind of right now. It's a little, that would be a tough one, to be totally transparent with you.
Yeah.
We're not getting some sort of a feed about which catalogs are not opting in. So that would be a hard jump for us. It is certainly something to look at in the future. And I think that, especially as you see some of these platforms that are creating their own gardens, to be able to go and look and see what's popular over there, and then see what's happening on the your Spotify's, Apple Music's, YouTube's of the world as well, and take a look at how that kind of plays together, is something that's very, very interesting, and would be something that we would most certainly be taking a look at as well, as we move forward. But for right now, we have not looked at that particular question. Yeah. But I will say that, kind of getting back to use as a tool, is that we are seeing that U.S. musicians are showing, fairly positive sentiment about using AI music as a tool. We actually have that 54% show positive feelings about, using AI as a tool for music. And that is compared with 35% of non-musicians. So you've got a situation where the musicians are showing some interest and some potential excitement about using this as a tool, and then the public is still hesitant on it. But that is not also exclusive just to music. Especially younger people seem to be hesitant about AI use in a lot of different verticals, whether it be the workforce or other things too.
I think you just nailed it, because I was surprised at that 54% number. But then when you think about it a little bit, it's a tool that they use in the studio or however they're using it. And you're absolutely right. You know, I have a focus group of 4 kids in their 20s, and they don't like AI. They don't like anything about it. They see it as a negative thing that plagiarizes, and it's just not something that we talk about a heck of a lot. But I would love to see numbers of, you know, the different age, you know, the demographics and how people are accepting it and using it day to day. But I can tell you for my songwriting clients, they've been using it for years in the demo process because they wrote the lyrics, they wrote the music. That version is not getting out. That's just to get the cut.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you're writing for a specific artist, you know, it really does help. It would seem to really help if that artist could actually hear a little bit closer to what the final output could be and how it all, you know, meshes together. Yeah. And I've heard that from others as well, is that's a very, very popular use of it. It's just, hey, this is the demo. We're sending it to, you know, this artist X, and we just want that artist to have a clear vision on what this could potentially be.
Right. So if you're writing for Lainey Wilson, you can actually make the song sound a little bit more like something that she would record.
Yeah.
That's if you're talking about this. I think there's still a fair amount of people that just, they want to be secret squirrel and not even mention that they're using it, for sure. You know, but
what do they say, Mike? It's like Ozempic. Everybody's using it, but nobody will admit it.
Exactly. Well, let's talk a little bit about retail, Jamie. Mass market retail's physical gains came out of indie retail's share. Is that a Gen Z sort of nostalgia story? Maybe a Walmart Target merchandising push? Maybe a little of both? What's going on there?
I think it goes back to our CD conversation in the fandom and the collectible about it. And I think that that's really what's driving that. I think that, you know, what we've seen is, yes, mass market really upped their percentage of the overall physical retail. Now, BTS had a very successful album and push earlier this year. And I believe, you know, did very well at mass market. I think specifically it was Target that they went with for that one. And that was incredibly successful. So they've really, you know, they did really, really well. But I do think that overall the collectible aspect, the price point that's a little bit lower than vinyl, those sorts of elements, they just kind of help mass market retail in this way, right? So you're going in there and it's the collectible aspect that's easy. It's easy to throw in the cart, possibly even, but like, you know, and like actually even the physical cart. But I think all of those play well to mass market and really helped drive it, right? And so I think that, you know, when we looked back at CDs and we looked back at the sort of the fandom or the collectible nature of them that really emerged, I think in this half year, mass market was in a very good position just to facilitate that for fans. And then you had the BTS activation, which was just wildly successful, which helped through mass market too, you know. So it did really, really jump up and really drive. And we did see, I think it was K-pop titles that had the top of the mass market, which kind of speaks to that collectible nature.
You know, I love looking at the reports because they show you that we're really in a global world today, that, you know, we're able to listen to music from all these different territories. But I find it interesting that music from the U.S. is popular in many other countries, but it's not necessarily the most popular in, you know, countries like Japan, France, India. You know, India, for example, is 83%, according to the report, is domestic. So for a label thinking about international expansion, talk about what that data means for those folks.
Yeah, thanks. No, these are some of the elements that we've been reporting on for a while, and I find just totally fascinating is how individual territories behave in sort of their local versus regional versus ex-regional content. And, you know, I think that one of the things we saw in the market over the past year or two are a lot more JVs, a lot more joint ventures in international territories. And so to kind of help people understand what was going on in those territories, to understand what, possibly they would want to know in terms of how to enter markets. I think it's really important to understand that, hey, Japan, Brazil is very Brazilian. I think it's 80%.
Wow.
India is 83 or 84% Indian. That these markets are very local. So, if that is a market that, strategically fits where you want to enter, hey, maybe doing a collaboration with a local artist makes a lot of sense. Or on the flip side, maybe it's a market that, is very, very X-regional, and, you can start to look at, okay, well, what country of origin, what languages, we look at language a lot at Illuminate too, what languages are most consumed, and really helps your strategy to try to find the right fit for going into a market that might even be a little bit more X-regional in its taste or international in its taste. So I think that what it does is helps kind of your entry point by understanding where people are naturally gravitating to. Now, there is sort of this second layer, right, of like, okay, well, who are the fans that we would want to then target as well, right? And that's a whole nother step where it's like, okay, well, typically younger ones are the ones that are going to want to listen to music in other languages and things like that. So there are all these other elements about when you start to go international, and which fans to target. But I think in terms of the local versus international makeup, I think it really helps for the strategic entry point and how you would want to either language or collaboration or those sorts of things. I will also say that India, Brazil, Japan, Nigeria all have very thriving music scenes. So when you look at these countries in our report and you start to see the ones that are very, very local, what I've noticed is that typically means it has a thriving music scene locally, because the population there is able to sustain it. And I think each one of the ones we just talked to really fits that description as well.
Wow. Well, as we kind of get near the end, Jamie, this, of course, is the mid-year report. If you look into your crystal ball for the rest of the year, any bold predictions for what will be in the year-end report?
Well, the one thing I wanted to call attention to, and is something that I find fascinating, and I think that, we're going to continue to look at and report on and keep monitoring, is sort of the market diversity aspects or the languages that are streamed even here in the United States. At the mid-year point, about 1 in 10 songs, audio songs in the U.S. this year was in Spanish language. That's a high point over the last few years. And I think that is definitely something to keep an eye on. I also think, though, in that chart is, we list out the top 3 languages. So you have English, then you have Spanish, then you have Korean, and then there is all of the other languages outside of those, right? That is a really important number to watch too, because, I think that in the United States, in terms of streaming, I think people immediately think, okay, well, if we're going to talk about languages, we're going to talk about English, obviously, Spanish and Latin music, and then we're going to talk about Korean because of the K-pop and how popular it is. But I think that going that extra layer down and seeing what happens in that all other category, and if that shows fluctuation, if that shows a possible gain, is going to be very, very interesting, because, one of the things that we're seeing is that overall there is a diversification of the streaming here in the United States, and that category of all other languages outside those, and whether that grows, that'll be fascinating to watch. And to keep an eye on it, if it's even a deeper diversification past just the top languages that we think about.
Congratulations on a great report again. And thanks for coming on and breaking it down for us and helping us understand it. Really great work. And we can't wait for our next conversation, Jamie. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you guys. And I really love coming on here and talking about the report with you when we put these out. So thanks again for the opportunity.
Awesome.
We appreciate it.
And we are wrapped. Before I let you go, Jamie, I got to tell you, page 16, I always love the documentary page that you guys do, because we love music documentaries, and there's always 1 or 2 on here. And I'm like, when did that come out? Because you can't hit everything, but it's like I print out that page and check them off as I watch them, because I'm such a big fan of music documentaries. I'll watch a documentary on an artist that I'm not even a huge fan of, just because I love seeing how the sausage is made and how people handle, pressure and fame and and what their origin story is. I love that page.
So, there were a couple of things. So what we typically do is we start talking about this report in like late March, early April, and we've got we start talking as a team, and then by beginning of May, we're like, okay, we've seen how the first quarter is shaped up. We've got our trends, and so we start to kind of throughout May, we start pull the data, right? End of May, early June, we up through like week 21. That Earth, Wind, and Fire documentary, which is number
5,
yeah, wasn't even out.
Oh.
So when we pulled the final numbers, I'm like, what the hell is this? Like,
it came out June 7th.
It went from 0 to 100 in like 3 weeks, which just shows like the amount of activity that thing drove to be able to do that in like 3 weeks to jump all the way up. And I think that's the Questlove produced one. It is,
yeah.
I don't know. Mike, have you seen it?
I have. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Is it fantastic? Okay,
it's really good. Yeah.
Okay.
And and it shows like all great documentaries, the kind of dark side of success and sort of, what kind of broke them apart and everything. And it's very well done. It's worth sitting down and watching. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna check that one out, because that was one that was like, hey, wait, where did this come from? Like, typically it's usually maybe there's a change in the order, like 1 or 2 flip-flop, but you're not going to see something that wasn't even on the list, on June 1st, all of a sudden be top 5 at the end of the month.
Yeah.
So that was one that really jumped out.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.